Hi all, only 2 days now to go for the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand to start on the 9th. So very exciting event coming up. And let's have a quick look back today at the encounter in 2006. There were 2 Blitz encounters in the Glitnir Blitz tournaments held in Iceland, Reykjavik. And this was a semi-final. So Magnus playing white in the semi-final against Vishy Anand played d4. This blitz game is of an exceptional high quality. Knight f6, c4, c5. Vishy Anand actually is using in this game the Benko Gambit. So gambits, especially on faster time controls, are often much more dangerous. The pressure of the compensation you get from sacrificing material, the initiative, causes a lot of problems which in the time constraints might be very difficult to try and resolve. So c takes b5, Magnus takes the pawn and he takes it again. So white is at the moment 2 pawns up, but theoretically now g6 is the move, not taking on a6. The most popular move is played by Vishy, which is g6, temporarily 2 pawns down, knight c3, and now bishop takes a6, knight f3, bishop g7. So the Benko Gambit, and Magnus chooses one of the most popular moves in this position is to play g3. If e3, of course, bishop takes f1, or e4 is a move which is quite popular. Bishop takes f1 is a slightly different game here, with bishop taking on f1, interrupting white castling. But it's supposed to be okay for white as well. So g3 though was played, d6, bishop g2, black castled, white castled, knight bd7, all fairly standard start position for the Benko Gambit. Rook b1 now, so this has the idea of maybe either eventually going for b4, but most common is just to get out of the fire of this diagonal, to be able to challenge this bishop on g7. And a4 will get control of that b5 square. We see knight e8 from black, so the knight has to be protected before white can consider b3. And it's protected with queen c2. We see knight c7 now. And there might be a potential threat on d5, so d5 is reinforced. Black might be considering to take on c3 and take on d5 potentially. Rook d1 reinforces the d5 pawn. Knight b6. And now again, more pressure on d5 is parried with e4. Bishop c8, and here let's put on a kibitzer. So white here stands slightly better. And Magnus plays now h3, preventing bishop g4. Bishop d7, b3. So this has the idea that bishop b2 is good to challenge this bishop. It's also stopping this knight from having use of these 2 squares more, getting a grip on a4 and c4. Queen c8, and now a remarkably interesting move, to say the least. The move a4 is played. So what's the idea? Did Magnus just miss this threat, taking on h3? Well, actually, white is kind of making a gambit of the h3 pawn. Bishop takes h3, bishop b2. Now if black played bishop takes g2 here, then we can see after king takes g2, white has a prospect of playing rook h1 here potentially, and some pressure building up on the king's side. Moves like knight g5 maybe later, or just try to swap this bishop off. So maybe that's part of the idea of this pawn sacrifice. We see now bishop g4 actually instead of bishop takes g2, and now black potentially is threatening f5 to try and emphasize this pin on the rook. So Magnus preempts that f5 by playing rook e1. On the move f5 now, I think there's some good options here. Knight h2, for example, is one good option. Just getting the rook out of the way just gives white some options there. e5 is not so hot here because I think d5 is a problem. potentially, or just f4. In fact, black can just play f4 so that might not be that great. So okay, after bishop g4, rook e1, this knight h2 is a very good resource against f5. So Vishy chooses knight a6, going for that b4 square, which has been compromised a bit. Nothing can protect structurally the b4 square here. It seems entirely logical. On the other hand, with the bishop here now, this b5 square is not covered, and white jumps into that, and not only that, is encouraging the exchange of the dark squared bishops, and this would weaken black's king here. So a very, very interesting position has emerged, and knight b4 can be answered with queen d2, which gives some attacking prospects to the queen on either f4 or g5 potentially. We see now Vishy actually taking on b2, which slightly weakens his king. If instead of that, just maybe knight b4 attacking the queen, queen d2, it's difficult to see how black actually can avoid an exchange of bishops. The angels are not exactly suggesting f6 in a hurry. I think there might be a technical reason here why this is the case. Actually, in this position, tactically, there's a move knight fd4 going into either c6 or e6. This knight being loose means after c takes, queen takes. That's nice for white in this position. So leaving e6 vulnerable like this for knight d4 is not very pleasant. So in this position, it doesn't seem, if black can't avoid this bishop exchange here very easily, his king is actually getting a bit weaker, and we do see bishop takes b2, rook takes b2, and now white potentially threatens the break in the centre. e5 is looking more likely here as a dangerous break in the centre. Bishop d7, knight c3, getting out of the way of that bishop. Knight b4 hitting the queen goes to d2, and it's got a very comfortable square on h6. Just eyeing that square on h6 shows that even though white is not really trying to progress his pawns on the queen side, this mechanism of exchanging the dark square bishop has compromised black's king safety quite severely actually, and in fact this leads now to a major mistake on Vishy's part. Vishy played in this position the move c4. This loosens the knight here, so b takes c, which seems unplayable because of knight takes c4, would actually attack the knight, and indeed that is the exact move that white played in this position, b takes c4, because queen h6 is such a menacing threat with the idea of knight g5 here, and the b4 knight is attacked. So what are black's options? In the game, black took on c4, and after queen h6, Vishy can't take this rook. Just knight g5 is actually a forced mate in 3 in this position. You know, rook d8, for example, just taking here, and queen takes f7, or queen h8. Take your pick. So this looks to be a very, very bad situation now after queen h6. Both b4 and knight g5 are threatened simultaneously, thus winning material from Vishy. He actually had to lose a piece. Now he played the move f6 to deprive knight g5. If instead, was there a lesser evil choice here, before we go on from that? If queen takes c4, was that any better here? Well, actually in this position, rook eb1 and both knights are under fire. How does black actually get out of this? If knight takes a4, then knight takes a4 and the queen is on b4. So after rook takes, we have rook takes b4. We're still winning a piece. So this has been a major blunder in this game to have played c4 in this position. Both knights are under fire. Queen h6 is on. White's strategy hasn't been on the queen side, it's been against black's king. So to progress with the game continuation, Vishy ended up now losing a piece after f6, rook takes b4. But it wasn't over yet. Knight e5, attacking c3 now from the queen. Queen e3, protecting c3. Queen c7, Now white took on e5, which does open up the rook here on the f file. F takes. Rook eb1. White threatens now infiltration with rook b7. Rook ac8. And now ignoring the c3 knight, rook b7, skewering here to get the bishop. Queen d8, not wanting to go in for that simplification. Now rook a7 is very, very dangerous here to try and get rooks on the 7th, but Magnus chose actually instead another good move, knight d5. He can still infiltrate with his queen actually on the 7th rank and start attacking everything on the 2nd rank. Rook c2. The two rooks are coordinating on f2. There is a purpose of that f file after all here. We see a defensive move from Magnus, rook f1. Still now white has this huge threat though of queen a7 here. Bishop g4. Magnus chooses now, instead of queen a7, another strong move, queen b6, wanting the queens to come off. If the queen is driven to e8, say, then again queen a7 is very strong in this position. So actually here Vishy took the queens off, rook takes b6, so he's a whole piece down. Bishop e2, but is he getting some sort of counter-attack? Instead of moving the rook now, which would allow counterplay with rook takes f2, quite dangerous potentially. You know, if rook e1, this would be a mistake, letting black in the game potentially. Or is it? Bishop takes b5, a takes. This is still a good position, even if in this scenario bishop h1 is still okay for white. But Magnus plays instead another good move, rook c6, just attacking this rook in return. He's going to have a very dangerous passed pawn if black takes on c6. So rook b2, now rook e1. And here we see this coordination of rooks on f2 after bishop takes b5, but it's simplifying for white and giving white a more dangerous passed pawn. A takes, rook takes f2. Technically, engine suggests bishop h1 as being the strongest move here. It covers the f3 square. Maybe in severe time constraints and pressure. Slightly less accurate move is played here, bishop f1, which allows rook f3. So is Vishy getting back in the game? He's got this pawn under control here. Rook's behind it, ideally. Rook e2, challenging that rook. But potentially giving up the b5 pawn here. If rook takes b5, then in this position white still has some work to do. You know, rook c8 for example, rook c7, there's some work to do there, but that wasn't taken actually. Rook takes g3 also seems good, but maybe not as good as rook takes b5 technically. Rook takes g3. Now we see king h2 or king f2 being strong moves in this position, forcing, it seems, a pair of rooks off potentially. But no, in this position black avoids any exchange of rooks by playing rook b to b3. So both rooks protect each other now. Magnus now plays b6. Rook g f3 check. King g2 is interesting, but king g1 was played. Rook b1. Rook f2 defending. f1. Rook e3. So there's some work to do here. It's not so easy, even a bishop up here. We see king h2 getting out of the pin. Rook takes e4. Bishop h3. The bishop could try and herd the pawn one step forward. If the bishop comes to c8, then there's b7. King g7, bishop c8. But what about these two pawns? Are they dangerous? Can they rescue the situation for black? A piece down. h5, b7, king h6. The king is coming in to help the rooks. Rook c7. Rook e1. It's starting to look a little bit dangerous. The king here, the two passed pawns. This pawn's been held back. Rook takes e7. King comes in to g5. Rook ef7. King h4. This king is starting to look a bit dangerous with these two rooks. King G2. The king can go to F3 on the check, but now we see G5, Rook F1, and here actually Black exchanged off a pair of rooks. What else? If he played Rook E2 check, then either bringing back the rook or King F3 should be okay, although it's starting to look a little bit dangerous, but it should actually be okay. In this position we see Rook takes F1. After Rook takes F1, check, Rook F2, Rook B6. Now Magnus plays Rook A2, betraying the idea that maybe at some point Rook A8 for B8, force that pawn through. G4. Rook A8 is played. Check, King F1, King G3. What about these two pawns? Are they really dangerous here? Are they worth a rook? B8 queening. Rook takes, H4. Everything's now invested in these two pawns in this blitz finish. Check, King F4. Magnus sacrifices the bishop to get rid of the two connected passed pawns. King takes G4, Rook B6. And now after H3, Rook takes D6, E4. Magnus is unstoppable here now. He just simply sacrifices the rook to simplify it down. His passed pawn is enough to win here after King takes, and this King can handle the passed pawn here. So here D6, after King F3, King G1, King G3, just he's queening. So now queening, Vishy could have resigned at this point, but it was Blitz, remember? So this is a very, very exciting Blitz game encounter, and represents, I believe, this may be the first time in Blitz that Magnus defeated Vishy Anand. So very exciting finish there. I hope you enjoyed that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.